Dean stood there under the spotlight, the music fading behind him, the room suspended in confusion. He didn't shout. He didn't joke. The drunken stage persona was gone in an instant. What replaced it was something far more dangerous in Las Vegas in 1963. A calm man who was paying attention. "What's going on back there?" Dean said again, slower this time. Every eye in the showroom turned toward the back. The two security guards froze. They hadn't expected this. Performers weren't supposed to notice, and even if they did, they were supposed to ignore it. One of the guards leaned toward the couple and whispered urgently, clearly trying to move them before things escalated. Dorothy's hands were shaking. Marcus leaned toward her, whispering that it was okay, that they'd just go, that they didn't want to cause trouble. He'd spent his whole life learning how to survive moments like this by shrinking himself. Dean saw that too. Double quotes. "Hey," Dean said from the stage, his voice firm now. "Don't touch them." The guard looked up, startled. "Mr. Martin, we're just—" "No, you're not," Dean cut in. "You're interrupting my show." The room was dead silent. 3,000 people holding their breath. This wasn't part of the act. There was no laugh line coming. Dean stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "They paid for those seats," he said. "They're dressed better than half of you people in here, and they're bothering nobody. So you're going to tell me right now why you're messing with my audience." The casino manager appeared from the side aisle, face tight, panic barely concealed. He hurried toward the guards, whispering furiously, but Dean was done. "No whispering," Dean said. "Say it out loud. I want to hear it." The manager forced a smile and spoke into the room. "Mr. Martin, there's been a misunderstanding about seating." Dean tilted his head. "Funny thing about misunderstandings," he said. "They always seem to happen to the same people." A ripple moved through the audience. Not applause, not laughter. Recognition. The manager tried again. "We just thought perhaps these guests would be more comfortable." "Stop," Dean said sharply. "Don't insult them, and don't insult me." He pointed directly at Marcus and Dorothy. "You're too comfortable where you are." Dorothy hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Dean smiled at her, warm and genuine. "Good, because you're staying right there." Then he looked back at the guards. "And if anyone tries to move them again," Dean said evenly, "I'm done singing for the night." The implication landed hard. No show meant refunds, headlines, angry bosses, very powerful men getting phone calls they didn't want. The manager swallowed. "Mr. Martin, perhaps we could discuss this privately?" "No," Dean said. "We're discussing it publicly, because whatever rule you think you're enforcing, I don't play for rooms that humiliate people." The manager glanced around, calculating. The audience wasn't hostile, but they weren't neutral either. This wasn't the South. This was Las Vegas, a city built on illusion, and the illusion was cracking in real time. Dean waited. Finally, the manager nodded stiffly. "The guests may remain." Dean didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I told you so." He simply picked up the microphone. "Good," he said. "Now we can all get back to enjoying the evening." The band hesitated, then restarted the song from the top. Dean sang the entire number looking straight at Marcus and Dorothy for the first verse, smiling like he was singing just for them. Dorothy cried openly. Marcus sat frozen, his chest tight, unable to process what was happening. No one had ever done that for them. Not publicly, not without apology or explanation. When the song ended, the applause wasn't polite. It was thunderous. Dean finished the set. New speeches. New sermons. He didn't need them. The message had already been delivered. Backstage, the casino manager confronted him, furious and terrified. "You embarrassed us," he said. "You put us in an impossible position." Dean took off his jacket calmly. "You put yourselves there." "You can't do that," the manager said. "You can't challenge house policy. Dean looked him straight in the eye. Watch me. The next day, word spread fast. Other performers heard about it. Musicians, comedians, lounge singers. Some were scared. Some were inspired. A few quietly told management they expected the same treatment for their audiences going forward. Within weeks, the policy changed. Not announced. Not celebrated. Just quietly abandoned. It was easier to let it go than to risk another public confrontation with a star who didn't. Bluff. Marcus and Dorothy never forgot that night. Years later, their children would hear the story over and over, not as a celebrity anecdote, but as proof that dignity could be defended, that someone with power could choose to use it for decency instead of comfort. Dean never talked about it in interviews. He never claimed credit. When asked once why he stopped a show in Vegas in the early 60s, he shrugged. They were part of the audience, he said. I don't sing for half a room. That was Dean Martin. Not loud. Not performative. Just a man who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop the music and say, that's not right. And once you do, nothing ever sounds the same again. Chun reached them. Breathless, his professional mask cracking under pressure. Mr. Martin, he said quietly, trying to regain control. We can resolve this privately. There's no need to. There is a need, Dean replied, just as quietly, but with a steel edge that cut through the room. Because this isn't private. This is happening in front of everyone. Dean turned back to the audience, still standing, still frozen, still unsure whether they were witnessing a breakdown or history. These people paid the same money you did, Dean said. They dressed up, they came here excited, and they sat down to hear some songs. And now they're being told they don't belong. That doesn't sit right with me. A murmur spread through the crowd. Not outrage. Not applause. Something heavier. Discomfort mixed with recognition. Chun tried again. Mr. Martin, house policy, Dean cut him off. House policy doesn't sing the songs. I do. Double quotes. Silence. Dean looked back at Marcus and Dorothy. You want to stay. Dorothy nodded, tears finally spilling over. Yes. Good, Dean said. He reached over, pulled out a chair, and sat down right next to them in the aisle. Gasps rippled through the showroom. Dean Martin, the star of the night, sitting in the audience instead of standing on stage. I've got nowhere else to be, he said calmly. So either we all enjoy the show together, or nobody does. Chun's hands were shaking now. He could feel the situation slipping beyond control. Refunds would be disastrous. Headlines, worse. And the performers, the other stars, watching from backstage lounges. Cocktail bars, hotel rooms would hear about this by morning. He leaned toward the security guards. Step back, he whispered. Leave them alone. The guards hesitated, then backed away. Chun turned to Dean. They may stay. Dean didn't move. Say it into the microphone. Chun swallowed. He took the microphone from the stand near the aisle. There has been a misunderstanding, Chun announced stiffly. Our guests are welcome to remain in their seats. Please enjoy the rest of the performance. Dean stood, nodded once, and climbed back onto the stage. He didn't acknowledge the applause that broke out, not thunderous, not polite, but relieved. He picked up the microphone and looked out at the room. Thank you, he said simply. Now let's finish the song. The band restarted Memories Are Made of This from the top. Dean sang it slower this time, softer, as if every word carried new weight. Marcus held Dorothy's hand, still shaking, still stunned. People around them glanced over naught, with hostility now, but curiosity, some with quiet respect. After the show ended, Dean didn't do an encore. He walked straight back to Marcus and Dorothy. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said, voice thick. Dean smiled. Yeah, I did. Security escorts appeared not to remove anyone this time, But to ensure Marcus and Dorothy were safely guided out, Dean walked with them to the lobby. "I want you to know something," Dean said before they parted. "If anyone ever tells you that you don't belong somewhere, that's their problem, not yours." Dorothy hugged him. Dean hugged back without hesitation. The next day, the Sands quietly revised its seating practices. No press release. No announcement. Just fewer rules that couldn't survive daylight. Other casinos took notice. Other performers paid attention. Dean Martin never mentioned the incident in interviews. When asked years later about moments he was proud of, he deflected with jokes. But people who were there never forgot it. They remembered the night the music stopped. Not for drama, not for ego, but for dignity. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't singing louder. It's knowing when to stop. Dean. Let's talk about this privately. The words barely left the manager's mouth before Dean turned fully toward him, the spotlight catching his face as 3,000 people leaned forward in their seats. "No, Bob. We're not doing this privately. We're doing it right here, right now. Because whatever choice you make, everyone in this room deserves to see it." The air felt tight, like it might crack. Robert Chun's shirt was damp with sweat. He wasn't just managing a problem anymore. He was standing at a crossroads with no safe exit. If Dean walked off that stage, the casino would be forced to refund thousands of tickets, cancel shows, and explain to the press why one of the biggest stars in the world had refused to perform over discriminatory seating. That kind of headline could poison a business overnight. But if he backed down publicly, if he overturned the policy in front of high rollers and old money regulars who expected segregation without saying the word, there would be backlash from the very clientele the casino had spent years protecting. Chun had seconds, not minutes. He looked at Dean again, searching for hesitation, for an opening, for a sign this was theater. There was none. Dean wasn't posturing. He was ready to leave. Chun turned sharply to the security guards. "Let them stay. They paid for those seats. They belong there." One guard instinctively started to object, but Chun cut him off. "The policy is changing tonight. As of this moment, every seat in this showroom is open to any paying guest, no exceptions." He made sure his voice carried. He wanted it heard. Dean nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Thank you, Bob." He turned back to Marcus and Dorothy. "Please sit down. Enjoy the show." Dorothy's composure finally broke, tears spilling freely, not from humiliation anymore, but relief. Marcus swallowed hard. "Thank you, Mr. Martin. You didn't have to do this." Dean shook his head gently. "Yes, I did. That's exactly why I had to do it." Dean moved back through the aisles, and something incredible happened. Applause began to ripple, then surge, people rising to their feet as he passed. By the time he reached the stage, the entire room was standing, not for a song, but for a stand. Dean picked up the microphone, waited for the room to settle, and nodded to the band. "Let's take it again. Memories are made of this." Then he glanced toward the 7th row and added quietly, "This one's for my new friends back there." The song filled the room again, but it wasn't the same song. The mood had shifted. People weren't just listening anymore. They were witnessing something. After the show, Dean told his manager to bring Marcus and Dorothy backstage. When they arrived, Dean was still in his tux, glass in hand, relaxed now, smiling. Come in, sit down. Can I get you something real to drink? Not the watered-down stuff." They talked for nearly an hour, not about the incident, but about life, where they were from, what brought them to Vegas, how the show felt after everything that happened. Dean treated them like longtime friends, not people he had rescued. Before they left, he looked Marcus straight in the eye and said something that stayed with him forever. "I'm sorry you were put through that. No one should ever be made to feel small because of who they are. And if you ever come see me again, you sit wherever you damn well please." Word of what happened spread fast, whispered through dressing rooms, casinos, and booking offices. Other performers took notice. Other managers quietly adjusted their policies, not out of moral awakening, but fear of being next. It didn't dismantle segregation overnight, but it cracked something that had been sealed tight for decades. Years later, after the Civil Rights Act made those policies illegal on paper, Marcus and Dorothy returned to Las Vegas and sat in the front row at a Dean Martin show. Afterward, they went backstage. Dean recognized them instantly. "You came back." He introduced them to his band like honored guests. As they were leaving, Dorothy told him, "What you did that night changed our lives. You made us feel like we mattered." Dean smiled softly. "You always mattered. I just made sure nobody forgot it." There were no cameras that night, no headlines. The next morning, just 3,000 people who watched a man risk his career for two strangers. Robert Chun later admitted that Dean forced him to do what he hadn't been brave enough to do himself. And when Dean was asked about it years later, he brushed it off. "I didn't do anything special. They bought tickets. They deserved their seats." It shouldn't have been a fight, but it was. In 1963 Las Vegas, standing up like that was dangerous. Most people stayed quiet. Dean Martin didn't. And that's why the real legacy of that night isn't a song or a standing ovation. It's the moment one man stopped performing and chose to live his values in front of everyone, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop the music and refuse to accept what everyone else has learned to tolerate.